But thank you all so much for joining us for tonight's program. Best-selling author Vicki Delany will discuss her new cozy mystery novel, The Incident of the Book in the Nighttime, a Sherlock Holmes Bookshop Mystery, in this installment of Author Hour in Massachusetts. So best-selling author Vicki Delany is one of Canada's most prolific and varied crime writers. She has published more than 40 books, clever cozies to Gothic thrillers to gritty police procedurals to historical fiction and novellas. Vicki is currently writing 4 different cozy mystery series: the Tea by the Sea mysteries for Kensington, the Sherlock Holmes Bookshop series for Crooked Lane Books, the Catskill Resort mysteries for Penguin Random House, and the Lighthouse Library series as Eva Gates for Crooked Lane Books. She is past president of Crime Writers of Canada and co-founder and organizer of the Women Killing It Crime Writing Festival. Vicki is the recipient of the 2019 Derrick Murdoch Award for contributions to Canadian crime writing. And she lives and is joining us tonight from Prince Edward's County, Ontario, Canada. So, all the folks who are watching live and the many more that will watch the recording, let's give a big virtual round of applause to Vicki for joining us here tonight. And Vicki, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much. I'm going to correct your bio a little bit. I'm actually the author of more than 50 books. I think I'm up to 55 now. And I am also no longer writing the Catskill Summer Resort series. Instead, I'm writing the year-round Christmas series. So I still have 4, but the Catskills one is finished.
Vicki, thanks for the correction. I must have been using an old bio. Rookie mistake. My apologies. So let's get right into it, though, tonight, Vicki. And before we talk about the book, I first wanted to talk a little more generally. As I mentioned in the introduction, you are a prolific crime writer, focusing now particularly on cozy mysteries. Wondering if you could define for us, what is your definition of a cozy mystery?
Okay, I have quite a large definition. Cozy mysteries are sometimes described as a book with no overt sex and violence. And I think it needs to go much, much further than that. You can have a really dark psychological suspense that has no overt sex and violence. It's all what's happening in the head, right? You can have a horror novel that has no actual violence, and again, no sex. I mean, something really, really intense. So I think you need to take that much further. So to me, essentially, a cozy is a book in which there's no real tragedy. In quite often, the character might have a spouse that died or a husband that died, so they moved to their new place. So there might be some tragedy in their background. But in terms of the crime that the book is concerned with, it's not really a tragic situation. And the dead person is usually, not always, quite often, somebody nobody knows or somebody nobody particularly liked. That's not always the case, but it's like in one of my, and I'll talk a little bit as well about my previous books. In one of my police detective books that I wrote a number of years ago, the Constable Molly Smith series, Constable Molly Smith says to one of her superiors, when I decided to become a police officer, I knew I'd see the tough stuff in life. Murdered women, kidnapped children, abused children, traffic accident victims. But that's not the worst of it, is it? She said it's the sheer tragedy of some people's lives. So there's none of that sheer tragedy of people's lives, usually to be found in a cozy. So cozy is about a group of friends, family members perhaps, who live in a close-knit community. It's usually a small town. It doesn't have to be a small town. It can be a big city, but again, a community within that big city. Something has happened in their town that has disrupted the peace. So the place these people are living is always very nice. You will want to go there. The characters own something. Usually, quite often, they're independent bookstore owners, tea room owners, restaurant owners, knitting shop owners, librarians, people that have fairly interesting jobs. And they live in this nice community where everybody is quite nice and everybody gets on well. And some, with the odd exception, of course, you have your frenemies and that sort of thing. And someone has died or something mysterious has happened, and it's up to our character and his or her friends and family members or whatever to get to the root of it, to find out what's happened in order to return their town to its pleasant state of being. The opposite, for example, is a noir mystery. And a noir, think of the famous saying, down these mean streets a man must go who is not himself mean. At the end of a noir novel, the world hasn't been put to rights. You might have solved the crime, you might have even caught the killer, but it's still a hard world. And the cozy, it's the opposite. It's all gone back to a pleasant place to be. Mm-hmm. A cozy mystery is also probably always, I don't know personally of any that are not, what is sort of sometimes called a puzzle mystery. A mystery novel, or particularly like a suspense or a thriller, doesn't always have a puzzle component to it, but a cozy book does. And that means that, to me, it's almost like a game of wits between the reader and the author. The reader must lay down the clues in such a way that the astute reader has a chance of solving the crime at or slightly before the protagonist does. The author also wants to foil the astute reader from doing that, so the author buries clues, sets up red herrings. You have a whole range of suspects that have secrets, reasons they want to keep things hidden, and red herrings, as I said, and that sort of stuff. You throw in a whole lot of red herrings, and so on a second read of a cozy novel, those little tiny things should stand out, whereas on the first read they don't. John put on his boots today instead of his shoes, and on second reading, oh, of course, that's why John was murdered, because he wore his shoes, right? Yeah, exactly. So I see that, to me, a cozy mystery has those two components: the fairly pleasant place, and the cozy mystery should be a light read. It should be a fun read. A lot of them are humorous, some are not. And then the puzzle mystery aspect. So to me, that's what makes a cozy. As I said, I have a long definition.
I guess you did. Yeah, that's great, though. Now, Vicki, next up, I want to know the Vicki Delany origin story. How did you get into writing? How did you become a published author?
Okay, my origin story is a little different. Sometimes I was a computer programmer, and I'm sure you can tell that I'm no longer young. I was a programmer way back in the early days of COBOL, where we worked on paper and we sent things off to be punch carded. And they came home they came back the next day, and that. So I was a programmer for years and years, and I really liked being a programmer. Maybe it's that puzzle thing happening again, right? I really, really enjoyed being a programmer. Things changed. Computers changed, obviously. And then I ended up working for the Royal Bank of Canada, Canada's largest bank. And I was a systems analyst there. The industry was changing too far, too fast. I wasn't interested in keeping up with the actual coding stuff anymore. So I became a systems analyst, and I didn't like it. Nothing wrong with being a systems analyst. I was bored and restless and that. So I thought, what else could I do? Well, I've always thought I might like to write a book. Maybe I'll write a book. At that time, I don't know if the bank still does it, but they did. When I was there, they would pay for any adult education that you wanted to take. Didn't have matter if it was relevant to your job or anything. So they paid for me to go to, obviously at night, community college, and I took a course in creative writing. And my first idea was that I was going to write for children, because I have 3 daughters. And I pretty quickly realized I didn't want to write for children. I was enjoying the course I was in. So I thought, well, what can I write now? So I thought, well, I like to read mysteries, so I'll write a mystery. So it all started from there. So my first book took me 4 years to write. My first 3 published books, I was still working at the bank. And I was lucky enough to be able to take early retirement from the bank. So I had 3 published books while I was working at the bank. And then I took early retirement, and it all just kind of kept on from there. So now I write, as I said, 4 books a year. And that's it. That's
apologies if we're already recovering ground from your first answer. But can you tell us specifically why you've chosen to write cozy mysteries now?
Okay, I'm going to step back just a little bit from there too and tell you what I used to write.
Yeah.
So I started by writing psychological suspense, a standalone sort of thing. I have three standalone novels, which are no longer in print. I got the rights back for those, and they all have the dual storyline narrative, where something has happened in the past, and the events of the past are affecting the future, and the people of in the present, rather, people of the present have to resolve the issues of the past. So I wrote three of those, and then I was published by the very well-known U.S. small press, Poison Pen Press, from Scottsdale, Arizona. Yay for Scottsdale. And they were certainly really good to me. And the Poison Pen, the press has been sold to a big company, but the bookstore is still in Scottsdale. If anybody's ever in Scottsdale, go to the Poison Pen. And anyway, then I started writing a police detective series. So I wrote an 8-book police detective series about a young woman who's a new police officer in small town British Columbia, the ones I referred to earlier. At that round about that same time, I wrote 4 books in a Klondike Gold Rush series, a little almost on the cozy side, although they're historical, so they're quite a bit lighter, set in the Klondike in the Great Gold Rush of 1898. And I also wrote 5 novellas for adult literacy. And if anybody's interested in asking me about that, because you're all librarians, or many of you are, I'll talk about it later. So yeah, so I wrote 5 novellas, 5 or 7, 7 novellas for adult literacy. And what happened was I then had an idea for a cozy-ish book. So one of my daughters at the time, it's a number of years ago, worked she's a paramedic, and she was working in the Turks and Caicos Islands. She had lots of funny little stories about a person sort of out of their element. And I thought that would make a nice book. So I'm a big believer in networking. If anybody out there is a writer or hoping to be a writer, I really believe in networking. And the thing that really turned out for me was my friend Mary Jane Maffini, who I met through the Crime Writers of Canada. She was at that. She's not writing anymore, but at the time she was quite a well-known cozy author. So I asked her if she would take my proposal to her agent and see if her agent might be interested. So her agent got back to me, said she really liked the book. She didn't think she'd be able to place it. She didn't, sorry, I didn't book this. And then not that long after that, she got a request from Penguin Random House, or we're looking for somebody to write the Lighthouse Library series as a work for hire. And she remembered that she had liked my work. So she wrote to me and asked if I'd like to try it. So I never intended to give up writing the other stuff, but the cozy stuff just kind of took over. So the Lighthouse Library was the first, and I found I really liked it. I liked the lighter stuff. I liked trying to be funny. I liked, not dealing with all that dark, murky stuff too. And I liked the puzzle aspect, which I didn't think I really would. So I was quite happy. I started the Lighthouse Library series, really liked it. My agent said, would you like to think about doing something else? And then we came up with the year-round Christmas idea, and it all flew from there. So now I strictly write cozies. I simply don't have the time to go back and do the other stuff, although I have no reason not to. So I never really gave them up. I just stopped writing because other things took over my time.
Can I
answer? That's a long explanation.
No, I like the long answers. It makes my job easier. Why do you use a pseudonym for the Lighthouse Library series?
The Lighthouse Library series is work for hire, and what that means is the publisher comes up with the idea, just the concept, right? And then they look for a writer to write it, as opposed to the normal way it works, where a writer writes a book and sends it to a publisher and asks if they'd be interested in it, or their agent does. So because they came up with the concept, they own the copyright, and they also own the copyright to the author's name. So I couldn't use if I use my own name, I'd never be able to use it again. And the best known, and most of your librarians will probably know this, pretty much the best example of work for hire is Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys. There's been umpteen Carolyn Keynes and Franklin W. Dixon, right? So what happened with the Lighthouse Library series, so I wrote that as Eva Gates. The Penguin Random House discontinued the series after 3 really successful books, who knows? And Crooked Lane picked it up, and Crooked Lane said to me, and Penguin gave me the copyright, which is not normal. They actually gave it, so they usually keep them, but they did give the copyright to me. So I could have used my own name, but I already had 3 books in the Lighthouse Library series out under Eva Gates, so I wasn't going to change the name of the author. That would have been confusing. So that's why.
There we go. You had mentioned that you had written novellas for adult literacy. Sally would like to know, can you tell us more about the Adult Literacy Project?
Okay, it was a Canadian publisher called Orca, which is very well known as a young adult and children's publisher. And they came up with the idea of books for adult literacy. The point being, I think it's a really good point, that adults that have low literary skills are embarrassed to be seen reading children's books. Plus, they're not interested in the adventures of a 10-year-old. So these books had adult themes, adult covers, adult language. They're actually the grittiest of all my books because of the short format. And the line just didn't work. So they've actually discontinued it. They really hope to get into China for ESL students, but then China kind of likes to do their own thing, and they would hire a Chinese, writer to do it. And as many of you know, literacy organizations don't have a lot of money. They don't have a big budget for buying books. But I really liked those. I really did. And I was quite sorry to give them up, but they are all still in print. As I said, I think I have 7 of them. If anybody's interested in looking at names of things, everything's on my website. It's the Rapid Read series, they're called. And I think it was a really great project. And I think it's too bad that it didn't continue.
So, yeah. Vicki, before we transition to the Sherlock Holmes Bookshop Mystery series, anything else you want to touch on regarding your other series, your past writings?
No, not really. Not really. My Constable Molly Smith series is all still in print. The Klondike books are all still in print. The standalones are not. I actually asked for the rights back, hoping to do something with them someday, modernize them up and something like that. But as of now, they're not in print, but they might, some of your libraries might have them.
So, Vicki, I suspect most of the folks on the call are probably already familiar with the Sherlock Holmes Bookshop series, but just in case there are some that aren't, can you give us sort of an overall brief synopsis of the series and let us know how did this series come about?
Okay. First of all, this is a new one, just came out last week, The Incident of the Book in the Nighttime. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention when I'm looking at my stack of books, when I talked about cozies, and librarians will know this, you can always tell a cozy book by its cover and by its title, right? You know, looking at this is not going to be a serial killer novel or a horror. It's no horror, right? The title is cute and funny and a little silly, and the cover is very, very bright. I believe in, judging a book by its cover. So this is the 10th in the Sherlock Holmes Bookshop series. So the idea came about that once I was this is my 3rd series that I started. And as the cozies were doing well and I was liking them, I started thinking, what could I do next? And I thought, it'd be nice to write a series with a character who owns a bookstore. And then I thought, well, I needed to have a little bit of a hook, something different about my bookstore, not just a bookstore, not even just a mystery bookstore. And then I thought, Sherlock Holmes themed bookstore, that would be great. And at first I thought a couple things. First of all, I thought, well, is it really feasible to have a bookstore that's dedicated to nothing but Sherlock Holmes? And I began looking at absolutely the amount of Sherlock Holmes stuff that's out there, not just the original books, but all the pastiches, all the movies, and there's movie tie-ins, books of every kind. Sherlock Holmes has been everywhere. He's been in the past, he's been in the future, he's been to outer space. He's fought dinosaurs, I think. I'm not quite sure about that one, but I'm almost certain that he has. And plus all the stuff that goes with it, the merchandise, there's the puzzles, there's games, there's tea towels, you can get a Sherlock Holmes thimble. I have a pair of Sherlock Holmes socks. Never mind, t-shirts and jewelry items and everything. You could absolutely stock a store with nothing but items related to Sherlock Holmes and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Lots of biographies about him. He wrote a lot of other books aside from the Sherlock Holmes books that are not nearly as well known. And then in my fictional store, there's a section of nonfiction dedicated to the creator of Sherlock Holmes and his times. And I'll mention that everything that I mention in these books and what the store sells exists in the real world. And the books all exist in the real world. I don't recommend them because I haven't read them all, but she'll take a book off the shelf. Somebody will come in and say, I want a book for a 12-year-old. And she'll say, have you read the Enola Holmes books or something like that? So all those things exist in the real world, as do the puzzles and thimbles and everything else. Anyway, so that's one thing. So then I thought I had to populate my Sherlock Holmes bookshop. And I hadn't really intended to make my character Sherlock Holmes, but almost instantly she became. I was probably not even finished page 1 when I realized that Gemma Doyle, is the main character, was going to be my interpretation of Sherlock Holmes as a modern young woman. So she thinks like Sherlock Holmes. She has the memory of Sherlock Holmes. She can be, which is a little unusual in a cozy, she can be a little bit abrasive. People can find her difficult because she doesn't necessarily have a lot of patience for people who don't keep up with her thought process fast enough. The police not entirely trust her, but they trust her instincts. Sometimes they work with her, sometimes they don't want to. So she is intended to be Sherlock Holmes, and I've had a lot of fun like that. Like, she's a master of disguise. Pardon me. She's a master of disguise. She can remembers all kinds, maps are imprinted in her brain that she could follow a map just by visualizing it in her head, that kind of stuff. And that's just been great fun. And so not only is she Sherlock Holmes, but she's a modern woman. She owns bookstores, she has a business, she has relationship issues, she has a friend that she wants to keep as a friend. So there's all those modern things too. Plus, what they did so well in the Benedict Cumberbatch series is showing how Sherlock Holmes works with modern technology. So she often thinks things like, Sherlock Holmes. I wonder what Sherlock Holmes would have thought of cell phones, for example, or something like that. And then on the other hand, of course, she has a business to run as well. And also she keeps insisting, I am not a consulting detective, I'm a shop owner, but then she rushes off and texts. So anyway, that is the origin of the Sherlock Holmes Bookshop series.
So there are actually people out there in the world like Donald. Those people do exist.
Oh, absolutely. The group in Toronto is called the Bootmakers. And I was a little hesitant at first. I don't want anybody to think I'm making fun of them. But the Bootmakers have really liked the series. They've really sort of enjoyed it. And I think Sherlock Holmes people are really, certainly they can be really intense. But as someone explained to me at the Bootmakers, it was a group that he really enjoys, a group of people with a common intellectual interest. And that's what he enjoys about it. And there are certainly people that maybe take it a little too far, but yeah.
And so, Vicki, we're obviously spoiler free tonight, but do you want to give us a brief synopsis of the plot of your 10th book, your new book that came out last Tuesday?
Okay, so Gemma Doyle's the main character. She is English. She came to England when her great uncle Arthur Doyle bought a bookshop. He bought a property at 222 Baker Street in West London, Massachusetts, because he's a Sherlock fanatic as well. He almost instantly realized that once he'd stocked it with all of his Sherlock Holmes things, he didn't want to have a bookstore. He couldn't sell it, times weren't right, so he managed to talk his great niece into coming over from England because she had owned a bookstore in England and running it for him. So she now lives in West London, Massachusetts. So one of the earlier books called The Game is Afoot, no, not that one. The Game's Afoot. The characters went to England, and this is the second time they've gone to England. So I enjoy taking Gemma basically back to her hometown. So she even says in the books that she doesn't have an encyclopedia knowledge of London like Sherlock Holmes does, but actually she does. And I've been to London several times, so I, trace her steps and all that. So basically what's happened in this particular book is she's gone to England for her sister's wedding. Her sister, Pippa Doyle, is so highly placed in the British government that no one actually knows what she does. There's the tie-in, right? She's the Mycroft character. And Pippa is marrying Grant Thompson from West London, Massachusetts, who met Pippa in the earlier book when they went to London to Sherlock Holmes convention, which is the way of me getting all the other characters to come to the wedding, right? The best friend, her partner, the best friend's fiance, and Donald tracks along. So after the wedding, much chaos ensues, and Gemma's suitcase doesn't arrive. She has to go shopping in the afternoon, so she's really jet lagged. So first of all, their plane's late. Her luggage doesn't come. She's got to go to this wedding, so she has to go shopping. So she's really jet lagged at the wedding, so she leaves early. And she runs into her ex-husband, who we find out that they owned a bookstore in London together. And when their marriage broke up, he sold her his half. Opposite way, she sold her half to him. That's what he stands up. He's waiting there in the lobby. He says he has a book he wants to show her that's the real thing. And the story begins from there. So thus the title, The Incident of the Book in the Nighttime. And there is something that I have a lot of trouble with. If anybody has any great ideas, trying to come up with a title that's a cozy title that tells you there's a book and that ties into Sherlock Holmes. At 10 books, I'm getting desperate, people.
No, Vicki, I was going to ask you about the title. So that's obviously, is that a nod to, a curious incident of the dog in the night? Yeah. And that book is referenced, you referenced that book in your book.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. But, so I finished your book this morning. I listened to it on Audible. I really enjoyed your book. It was so much fun. It was very funny. I found myself laughing out loud. Mostly Donald was but there was some. I loved the dynamics with her and her mother, her and her sister. It was just a really, really, really fun, fun read. I really enjoyed it. So, Vicki, can you talk a bit more about any research you've done regarding Sherlock Holmes? Do you now consider yourself a Sherlock Holmes expert?
I am by no means a Sherlock Holmes expert. I've always enjoyed the canon. I've read all the books and short stories. I have watched several of the TV shows and movies. My favorite, everybody always asks me, my favorite is Jeremy Brett. So I don't know the minutiae. I can't argue with some of these Sherlockians about the finer points or that sort of a thing, but I have enough of a knowledge. And the books themselves are not intended for Sherlock experts. You don't have to know the name of the Hound of the Baskervilles in order to be able to find a clue in the Cat of the Baskervilles, which is one of the books. But there's little Easter eggs in it, there's in the shop, the Sherlock Holmes Bookshop and Emporium, there are 17 steps up to the second floor. In 221B, there were 17 steps, that kind of thing. The shop cat's name is Moriarty, after the Sherlockian villain. Moriarty hates Gemma. He's a good shop cat. He likes everybody else. He hates her. I see Moriarty the cat as a master criminal trapped in an 8-pound body. At one time, she's at the top. One of the books, she's at the top of the stairs, and he sort of accidentally sort of shoves her, and she was in danger of falling down the stairs. That kind of thing. So those are all just the little Easter eggy things that I put in. Oh yeah. So you asked me about me. I know enough about the Sherlock Holmes canon that I know what the incident of the dog in the nighttime is, so I was able to find the title out of that. But no, I don't know all the minutiae.
Yeah. This is on the side, but this stood out to me. I'm going to say at least 4 or 5 times in the book, you talked about how much government surveillance cameras there are in London. What's that all about, Vicki? That it's the most surveilled city in the world, or something along those lines?
It was a few years ago anyway, and it probably still is the most surveilled city in the world. There are CCTV cameras pretty much everywhere in public places, like on the streets and that. In some businesses might install them as well. I'm a big lover of British TV shows, and the police are always going through the CCTV footage, and they can look at somebody's picture, they hustle down the street and match it with all their software and all that sort of stuff. And I'll bet in a lot of countries, including yours and mine, there's a heck of a lot more surveillance goes on than people realize, particularly when you're in public. No, I'm not saying that the government's peeking through your bedroom windows. I'm not. But when you're out in public, in your car or walking down the street, I suspect there's a lot more. So that's one of the things that Gemma is able to do because she thinks like Sherlock Holmes, is dodge the cameras when she knows where they are and protect her, her face from being seen if she needs to. Basically, it's wintertime when they're there, so she's got a big scarf on, she's got a hat down over her head. So there's ways of fooling the cameras if you know what you're doing.
And I think you reference, you say out loud, how would Sherlock Holmes operate, in a time when there's all this technology and CCTV cameras? You would think that maybe it would make things a lot easier for him. All right, so we will circle back to the book, I think, during the audience Q&A, but I do also want to talk about your writing style and your writing process. And I guess, could you walk us through a day in the life of Vicki Delany? What does a normal day of writing look like for you?
Okay, first of all, give me 1 second. I'm going to go and grab something that I think that you reminded me of that I think you're.
All right, I think we're getting a prop, folks. All right. And while Vicki is going to be joining us here, if you have any questions for her about anything related to her writing career, whether it's this book or this series or any book or series she's written, feel free to get that into the chat or the Q&A. All right, Vicki, you're back.
I have an essay in this book. This book is Felons, Victims, and Violence, Agency and Feminism in the Original Sherlock Holmes Canon. Came out 3 or 4 years ago, not too long ago. I have an essay in this. So I said I'm not a Sherlockian expert, and I'm not. But from what I talk about 3 of the different stories, including my favorite, which is the Scarlet Band, and I look at it, the Speckled Band, and I look at it from a feminist perspective and analyze the actions of both the male and the female characters from a feminist perspective, as do most of the authors in the book. So I definitely recommend that for people that have an interest in sort of the academic study of Sherlock Holmes. That's pretty much the limit of my nonfiction publications, however. Okay, day in the life. When I'm at home, I write every day, every single day. I usually like to start, say, 9 o'clock. I'll get up in the morning, have my breakfast, read my email, maybe a little bit of the newspaper. And then I'll start about 9 o'clock. And I like to do my goal, but it's not really a set goal, but I like to do 3,000 words a day. And I can usually achieve that on a good day. So that takes me till 1 o'clock, maybe 2 o'clock. My children are all adults. I live alone. I don't have any other at home. I don't have any other pressures on my time. If I have doctor's appointments, hair appointments, I always have those in the afternoon. When I'm away, I don't write much. Now, I'm actually going to, as Robert and I were talking before this began, tomorrow I'm going to Peru and Costa Rica. So in Peru, I'm going to be on tour for 3 weeks. I won't write a word, not a word. In Costa Rica, I'm just going to a beach hotel for 2 weeks. And I'm going by myself. Any beach hotel holiday can get a little bit boring after 2 weeks. I do this every year. And I will write there. So I write in the morning, I'll enjoy the morning, and then I'll go off down to the beach and that in the afternoon. So that's kind of my routine. I have a little of a different sometimes way of going about it. I have a laptop computer that is only ever used for writing books. I don't even do business correspondence on it. It's attached to the internet, so I can use Dropbox. I've never set up FaceTime. I've never set up my email or Twitter or anything like that. And the purpose of that is, how easy it is for the fingers to just sort of start wandering off, and you open Facebook and you open, Twitter, and you run down the rabbit hole. And an hour later, you realize you've forgotten your work. And part of that's because I heard a woman talking on the radio a number of years ago, and she talked about what she called the creative space. And to her, the creative space was that millisecond or that couple of seconds or that minute between one idea and the next. And she feels that we're losing the creative space because as soon as the first idea ends, you open Facebook, you read your email, you do all that, rather than giving yourself that minute maybe, or even less than a minute, a few seconds, just to simply let your mind go from one idea to the other. So that's kind of what I do. and my other, so I have a nice office with a nice desktop computer, and I use that for everything else. I also stand up. I've been standing up for years and years and years, simply because I once read that it was pretty bad for your back to be sitting down all day. I just happen to have a half ledge between the kitchen and the dining room that's just the right height that I prop my laptop up there, and I have a padded thing for my feet, and right there. So that's it.
Now, Vicki, I'm legally required to ask you this question. I have to ask it to every author I interview. Are you a plotter or are you a pantser?
I'm a plotter. I was not a plotter to begin with. Quite a few of my first books when I was writing for Poison Pen Press were pants, meaning I came up, I wrote it as it occurred to me. And then when I got contracts from companies like particularly Penguin Random House and Kensington now, they want an outline before you begin. I've never had an outline refused, and I don't really know why they would want them. My good friend Linwood Barclay always says, what are they going to do, if you don't stick to the outline? And then they produce a really great book, but it's not the outline that we agreed to. But they want an outline, and I actually don't mind that because I have found it's a lot better for me. I think it works for a lot better. I'm kind of a semi-outliner, actually, because I like to start the book with nothing more than the very, very vaguest ideas. The idea can be a word. It can be seance, for example. One of the Sherlock Holmes books, they go to seance. That was the word. I wanted to have a book that said at a seance. What do I do with that? So I'll sit down, I'll start that, and that gets the characters and the plot going, the guest characters, so to speak, set in my head. And then probably maybe as much as a quarter of the book, I'll write that way, and then I stop, and then I outline the rest. And I find that really works for me because I don't get stuck in the soggy middle, wondering what's going to happen and how I'm going to make things come together, because I know who did it and why, and therefore I can lay down all my clues properly that way. So, yeah.
So, Vicki, what advice would you give to aspiring cozy mystery authors?
Two pieces of advice I always give to any kind of author. First of all, one is read. I really believe you need to read, and you need to read a lot. You need to read, they certainly need to read in the genre they're trying to write in, but they also need to read widely, I think, it's kind of how you learn your craft in a way. And like I said earlier, I'm a big believer in networking. Sisters in Crime is a great organization. They have chapters all over the world. For networking, for getting the word out there when you do get a new book, for hearing, who's looking for what and that sort of stuff, but just the community thing. And when I was the president of Crime Writers of Canada, it was before the pandemic, and I think we've lost an awful lot since the pandemic. And it's really nice to be able to chat to people like you on Zoom. But a meeting it doesn't create that networking stuff, right? Because any online meeting is you can't talk to everybody at once, and it's often scripted, or somebody talks too much and that kind of stuff. I feel that we've lost a lot in terms of personal contact for that. Crime Writers of Canada in Ottawa, I live about 3 hours drive west of Ottawa, had a get together last night, which was really nice. First time in a long time. They met at a dinner. I think 16 people went. I was supposed to go because one of my daughters lives in Ottawa. So I was actually in Ottawa, and something came up, something pleasant, but I didn't go to the dinner, and I'm sorry I didn't, because here I am talking about how important it is, and I didn't. So in answer to your question is about being an aspiring writer is, yes, join groups like Sisters in Crime. If you're Canadian, Crime Writers of Canada, Mystery Writers of America, what's it in the UK? Crime Writers Association in the UK. Not necessarily to sell your book or find a publisher, but to find out what's happening in the world and to make friends. And the other piece of advice is definitely go, if you can afford it, and if you can have the time, to conferences, particularly Malice Domestic, which is in Bethesda every April. And it's a cozier sort of conference. There are several types, and it's a really great way to meet people. I'm glad all those picked up again after the pandemic. I really am, because that's the best way to actually meet people face to face and make some friends.
So we're going to transition now. We have a 15 minutes left. We're going to transition fully to audience questions. We have two in the Q&A and about four in the chat. So feel free to keep getting those in, folks. Before we get to Lisa's question reminds me of something. So, I'm sitting in Tewksbury, Massachusetts. We have a sister community in England, Tewksbury, England. It's spelled a little differently, but Tewksbury, England. Now, I know that New London, Massachusetts is a fictional town, but
West London.
What is it?
West London.
West London. What I said, New London. West London is a fictional town in Massachusetts, but do you know geographically where that would be located?
It's Chatham.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and some of the books she'll talk about, we're going to Chatham or so and so lives in Chatham. You asked me about research and I never answered. Do you want me to answer, or do you want to just?
Why don't you answer that? Yeah.
My main point of research with cozy novels is location. So I have gone to Cape Cod. The other series, which other one of my series? The Tea by the Sea series, ta-da, is also set in Cape Cod. It's set in North Augusta is the town. It's supposed to be North Truro. I think that's how you pronounce that. So I've been to those places doing location research. I did go to London specifically for the recent book that we're just talking about. So that's for cozy mysteries. That's mostly the research. When I was writing police procedurals, I did a lot of work with Canadian police. They were extremely helpful. The cozies, not so much. Killing methods, yeah, sometimes I have to, I've killed people with lots of different methods. Like there's lots of poisonous plants in your garden. Anyway, that was my quick answer. What was the question? Oh, West London. We were talking about West London. Yes.
Yeah. Well, and actually, so I'm curious. Are you going to have any future books set in Peru or Costa Rica?
Probably not. American cozy readers generally, and I know that very broad definition, like their books set in the US or in England. They're very fond of locations in England. And also another reason is you need, in a cozy mystery, most people like the whole gang to go, not just the main character. Like, for example, if she got married and went off on her honeymoon, it would just be her. And they're like, cozy readers like the all the smaller characters, so they all have to go or no one goes. So yeah, they won't be going to Peru. One of my books, it's kind of a long story of why I got there, and I'm not going to go into it. I have been to South Sudan. There's not many people in the world that can say that. And while I was in South Sudan, I met a RCMP officer that was working with the South Sudanese police doing training. And one of my adult literacy books, I said those are the darkest books I write, is set in South Sudan. And another one of them is actually set in Haiti because I went to Haiti and met RCMP doing the same thing there. So that's just an aside.
All right, so we've essentially answered Lisa's question. So Eva Jane asks, are any of your main characters or secondary characters based on real people you know?
The only one who is in all of the books I've written, and she knows it, my friend, is Bernie in the Tea by the Sea mysteries. Ta-da! That's the new one, just came out this summer. Bernadette Murphy, is a wannabe novelist, and she can't settle on anything. She's running around in all directions. It's going to be set in this time frame. It's going to be set in this place, and then she gets a new idea and she starts it all over and blah blah blah. And that's totally based on this friend of mine, good friend of mine, who has started books as different as a mystery set in the time of King Solomon, a mystery set in the Middle Ages with lots of jousting and horseback riding, and a mystery featuring a ferret as the detective. So my friend knows that she's my interpretation of Bernie, that my friend has never finished any of these books because she gets a different idea, starts it all, gives up because she has another idea. So that's pretty much who Bernie's based on. But my other characters, no.
So, Vicki, this book, your latest book, has gotten great buzz, great reviews. I think it's like around 4.5 out of 5 on Amazon, on Goodreads.
Good.
The one negative thing that I saw on the Goodreads reviews, I read like the first 50 Goodreads reviews. A couple of folks were saying that they had, and we're not going to go into spoilers too much, but the idea that Ryan wasn't featured enough in this story. What are your thoughts to the folks who wanted more Ryan?
Wanted more Ryan. Ryan is the boyfriend. He's the West London detective. I couldn't think of anything for Ryan to do in England. So I sent him away on a fishing trip, right, with her father and another one of their male friends. Yeah, it's mainly because I realized that, but I had to get him out of the way. He's much more active because in their town of West London, he's the lead detective, right? So when she's solving crimes, she's communicating with him a lot. London's not his. He has no authority, of course. It's not a place he knows. The only time he's ever been there, he's been with Gemma. All he would do would be to get in the way.
Yeah.
But he does come back in time for the climax.
Oh yeah, no, he's there. Absolutely. So an anonymous attendee asks, what is your favorite part of the writing process? The first draft, the editing, the final revisions, the publicity, or something else?
Oh, absolutely not. My least favorite part is the first draft. Absolutely hate it. I always think, oh, why am I doing this? I'm never going to write another book. Once this is done, I don't ever want to do this again. And my favorite part is probably the second draft because I feel the first draft is the really, really hard stuff. And because I'm a plotter, I have a pretty good first draft when I'm finished it. So the second draft is a time for me to, what should I say, enjoy the fact that I've done this, right? And the second draft certainly needs work, but it's a much different feeling than the first one because you've actually got this finished book and all you want to do now is make it better, as good as it could be. So that's probably it. I'm proofreading right now. That's another one of my least favorite parts because I've been through this book so many times. So I've probably done 4 drafts of my own. I've had substantive edits from the editor. It's been copy edited. I've done all that. I'm reading it again. Sorry, no matter how good my books are, they're not that good that that I'm not that interested. I'm sorry to say. I find it very difficult to pay attention to the proofreading, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So my good friend, my old pal Dottie, wants to know, do you find yourself doing more publicity online now rather than in person?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. I don't really do bookstore signings much anymore. Kensington, who publishes the Tea by the Sea mysteries, they've got quite a good publicity department. And in fact, I was in Massachusetts and I think this was the
Groveland.
year before. Anyway, I've been on tour with them, going to bookstores and libraries, but not nearly as much as I used to. And part of it's because I'm kind of I'm better known now than I was when I was first starting. So I needed to really, kind of get out there. But yeah, it's much more online. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Blue Sky now. I'm on Instagram. And so people are definitely welcome to chat to me there. I belong to Cozy Mystery Crew on Facebook. I belong to a blog called Mystery Lovers Kitchen. And things like this are great. I mean, this is great as a way to talk to your audience without me having to travel all the way down there. But travel is fun too, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. So Susan O wants to know, do you get much input on choosing the cover? You talked earlier about how the cover is so important and you judge a book by its cover and you want folks to know when they're looking at the cover that it's a cozy mystery. How much input do you have on the cover art?
Almost none. Almost none. They'll sometimes send me a first sketch in pencil or charcoal or however they use it. And can say something like, that doesn't look like the dog in the book. The dog in the book is smaller or larger or something like that. That's about it. The general design of the cover, I don't really have any input into it at all. And almost never do I. There was only once did they do something I really didn't like, and it was one of the year-round Christmas series that's set in the summer. And they just, and it, so it's a river and there's a boat on the river and there's way too many trees. The background, it made it look dark, even green, it can be a dark color. It made it look very dark. So I did say that I didn't like that and they did work with it, but generally speaking, no.
So Mary, who like you is a computer programmer, she asks, any thoughts on using artificial intelligence for editing, proofing, PR, or any other part of the writing process?
No, partly because I'm now not really wanting to learn how to do those things. Certainly, I wouldn't want to write a book using it. I mean, that is cheating. When you sign contracts now, they do say something. You testify that no more than 1% of this book is AI generated, or 2% or something like that. You have to sign that. I can't see right now. I can't really see using AI for editing, because they could probably make it perfect, but they would lose the author's voice. You use bad grammar. I use bad grammar. I use a lot of sentence fragments, and AI would try and fix those things. So I don't think so. Yeah, and sometimes you use words that don't exist because it's a silly word that someone says to be silly. That I can't see it working. Certainly not for me. And who knows what's going to happen in the future? I hope it doesn't. It would be nice if it does remove the drudgery of proofreading. My gosh, that would be nice. But certainly not the writing. I would not like to see the day where AI is doing a lot of the writing.
So we're approaching the 1 hour mark. We'll take a couple more questions, but I know that we need to be cognizant of the fact that Vicki is probably maybe doing some last minute packing or whatnot. We want to give her time to get a good night's rest before her trip tomorrow. Dottie wants to know, Vicki, what authors do you read?
I'm a big fan of, like I said, I watch a lot of British TV. I like a lot of Brit. I read Americans too, but I particularly like British authors. And I read. I don't read a lot of cozies. To me, a cozy is kind of almost a palate cleanser. I'll read a thriller or a domestic suspense or a police procedural, and then feel like I need something a little lighter and that. So I'll go to a cozy. So some of my favorite writers right now are the women that are writing this sort of domestic suspense or whatever. Ruth Ware. Tana French, love Tana French's last couple of books. I love Kate Morton, not that keen on her latest book. That sort of author in that class. In cozy mysteries, I'm a big fan of Ellen Byron. Kate Carlisle's great. Jen McKinley. All my friends on the Cozy Mystery Crew on Facebook and on Mystery Lovers Kitchen, they all write great cozies, and we all enjoy reading each other's books.
So, Vicki, you've already told us about your website and your social media, so we know where to find out more about you. What is next for Vicki Delany? Are you working on any other projects? You have anything in the pipeline?
I always have something in the pipeline. So what I'm working on right now, what I'm taking with me to work on in Costa Rica, and I said I'll be working for 2 weeks, is the next Lighthouse Library series. So it's number 13 that I'm working on that now. My next book coming out is, ta-da-ta-da, put it here. I know I brought it. Obviously, I didn't. My next book that's coming out is called Shot Through the Book. It's a Lighthouse Library story, and it'll be out in May.
Uh-oh. Vicki, how many books are you publishing a year nowadays?
4.
Oh my gosh, Vicki, you are incredible.
One in each of my series. Yep.
Yeah. So, Vicki, is there anything I didn't ask that you wish I asked, or is there anything you'd like to let our audience know before we wrap things up?
I don't think so, but I definitely like to thank everybody who attended, and I hope that you enjoyed my talk. And I don't travel near as much as I used to, but I do come down sometimes. So if your library would like to have me, we can always talk about putting something together, or talking like this. But yeah, I appreciate everybody who listened in very much on a Friday night. Thank you.
Yeah, so folks, let's give Vicki one last big virtual round of applause for a great conversation.
And thanks to Robert too.
No, I don't need any applause, Vicki. But folks, please look for the follow-up email in the next 60 minutes with the recording, as well as a link to Wellesley Books to purchase a copy of Vicki's latest book. And also there'll be information about some other upcoming virtual author visits, including a few mystery authors, not cozy mystery authors, but a few sort of more general mystery authors. And please take the feedback survey when you exit the Zoom. Probably take you about 60 or 90 seconds to fill it out. So thank you all so much, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their night and has a great weekend. Safe travels, Vicki.
Right. Thanks very much. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.